We are rolling. So welcome everybody to the May Toronto SharePoint Users Group meeting. We've got Brockbank going to be presenting on modern SharePoint search customization. Is that the right mouthful?
Yeah, it's community components that are available to do modern search.
So generally, before we get into the session, we do a bit of a Q&A with the group. We do, upcoming events and things that are happening, just maybe to make people aware of a few things going on. So the SharePoint conference, it was this week that it was supposed to be happening in Las Vegas before everything shut down. That's hasn't so much turned into, but sort of a virtual conference came out of that. I'm drawing a blank here because I should have prepped for this. Phil or Ilya, do you remember when that was coming up?
The conference for online, it's available for registration through the SharePoint Saturday site, and I can't remember the dates now. I think it's next week.
Yeah, will happen next week.
And then there's Galactic Summit, which is the online replacement for the ECS, the European Collaboration Summit, which was supposed to happen at the beginning of June. So that's happening June 6th and 8th, I believe. Is there other online events? I guess Build is going on this week as we speak. I've had no time to look at that. I don't know if others have had a chance to dial into it.
Yeah, I've caught bits and pieces today. I caught one interesting one, which was the new add-in for VS Code, and it's supposed to be getting built, releasing next month, for an add-in for Visual Studio that allows you to do Teams apps.
Very nice.
And it lets you basically do, they don't have the F5 available, but you'll be able to do an F5 build and run into your Teams. Now, it's not web, I don't think it's the web parts, it's your websites that you create and so forth that you're going to go through the process of doing. So it's different than that of the SPFX team stuff.
So are they still calling it SPFX, or there's still rumblings about reading that?
I take it next week we'll find out what that name is, or tomorrow's call they might give it to us. I don't know when the announcement. But there's virtually nothing on that level of development at Build. A lot of stuff on the Power products in Build.
Okay.
So there's a lot of stuff I'm doing, Power stuff. Some new stuff they've added. I haven't been able to follow it all. It's been hard to keep a session going because as soon as that session ends, about 5 minutes later, it cancels out your video and you have to go click on something else to see it.
Okay.
So I believe all that stuff will be recorded and made available afterwards. A lot of it's one-on-one conversations with people. A lot of interesting stuff around Teams. So there's lots of stuff new coming and changing.
Very nice.
Yeah, and they've been also talking quite a bunch about Graph API and what's happening there, and there seems to be a lot of interesting stuff coming up in a sense that because it is a developer conference after all, so what can developers do on top of Microsoft's whole platform? And it's
so any news on a Streams Graph API endpoint?
Not that I have heard of, no.
Okay, that one seems long overdue. You can hook into most of the 365 group stuff, but not Streams for whatever reason.
Probably going to be a new name and a new interface.
It's about that time, isn't it? To just everything for the sake of it. So anybody on the call, appreciate people muting or staying muted as they come in, but if you want to unmute, if you've got a question, comment, things you want to share before we dive into the main presentation, please feel free to.
Just one other announcement I'll put out there. It's kind of late in the process because Andrew's done 5 of the 6 sessions he's doing. Andrew Connell has been doing a series on preparation for the MC600 exam and covering the content that you need to understand. All that material is now available up in Microsoft Learn that he's going to be doing, but he basically went through everything you should know about identity, everything you should know about Graph, everything you should know about SharePoint and Teams, and then yesterday he did what you should know how to do in Office add-ins, and tomorrow he's doing a session on behind the scenes, how they decided on how that all works. Now all the sessions have been recorded and are available through his Witana site. If I remember in somebody's interest, I can get you the link and you can go look up the videos and watch them. he covers basically what the exam is all about, and then he goes through and talks about each of the specialties that are available.
What is the title of the 600 exam?
I can't remember off the top of my head. It's the certification for developers, 365 developer and 365 developer exam, I think. Most of it is at the fundamentals for a lot of topics, but they expect it to be at the associate level for identity and graph. So you must know those two in much more depth.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, it's building applications and solutions with Microsoft 365, and I went and did that on a beta phase, and I would really as well recommend doing that, just because it is fun exam actually to do. You will learn more during the exam and than you normally do. So,
how did you do on the exam?
Yeah, so that many of the exams are more or less about some specific topics, but I like that because I was able to kind of use my all knowledge in one single exam rather than having eeny-peeny detailed information.
So it was a fun exam. That's not something you usually hear. But,
I liked it.
Did you pass? Did you pass?
Yeah, I passed that.
Okay.
It was really good.
So Bill, if there's nothing else from the audience, do you want to dive right in?
Yeah, nobody else got a question? I don't think we have a lot of people on, do we?
I've got 17.
Okay. Did Eli show up? Is Eli out there?
I don't see him in the list, no.
He sent me a text wanting to know something, so.
Okay.
Okay, so what I wanted to cover, this is a session I did back in SharePoint Saturday, just to cover it. It is going to be similar in some areas, but a lot different in others, because these components that we're dealing with have relocated in GitHub. So there's 2 versions of it out there, and the cadence of updates seems to be now every month, I guess, with their availability to do changes. So what this is about is, in the new modern world of 365, we can no longer build out refinable searches in the current process. They're going to give it to us someday, but someday may be a little bit too late for some of us. And I have used this already on a project, and it works really well to do it. And there's a couple of things I was trying to remember how to do quickly today, and we'll see if I can remember how to do it later. I'll have to look it up on my other site. So the overall concept is to change in the modern pages. You no longer have an out-of-the-box search capability because we don't have the old classic pages. And modern pages are made out of the modern web parts. They did not move those connectable web parts over. And until we had connectability, which came out a bit later in the framework, it wasn't possible. So you'd have to build it all as one piece. I have noticed that Valo has a similar piece in their component set to do a search center, but I believe it's a one web part solution with lots of settings. I have not worked with it, but I see they framed it the same way as the box. So this is a background on me to get going. I'm not new to SharePoint. This is something I've been doing for more than 17 years. I've been working in knowledge management solutions for more than 21 years. So I started back in the site server days, and predates it. My current role is really an architect, which means I'm the guy looking for the problems before they happen and trying to find solutions before they get to everybody's foreground. And usually that now also includes getting projects that have gone off the rails. So I really specialize in the online product and support and development. I've been doing a lot of work with the Power product, the Power Automate, PowerShell components that are available in the public space, all that type of stuff. I did spend 4 years as an MVP. I'm now just listed as an RMVP. That means they offer me sessions. And if anybody wants the material and they can't get a hold of what I'm giving, there's my email address. You send me an email and I'll put it all together and send you either links to where you can get it or copies of what we have. Most of the stuff is available on the web that I'm going to be showing. Quick coverage. So how can I do a modern search center today? What happened to the old search web parts? We don't have them in the modern world. Where can I get modern search web parts? These are all things that we need to understand how to do if you're just somebody configuring SharePoint. So there is a solution out there. It's very simple to do. You can pull it down. Anybody who has a tenant and rights to install an application can go pull the components already built for you and put them into your tenant. Now, there are two pieces I'll talk about as we go through this, but the one piece for the web part is already built. And if you pull the solution and follow the instructions, you can do the add-in capability as well. There's two add-ins, and I'll cover that in a second. So what is the modern web parts? So the current limitations of modern search is that we don't have the old capability to do a refiner with our choices or our metadata. We get this screen that's only one way and it's a static page. The objectives in having a new version is to take a web part in the modern space and put it on a page and be able to use it. Now, at one point, we didn't have connected web parts. We now have connected web parts. So in this case, we have 4 connected web parts we'll look at and how they work together. There used to be 6, but they dropped it to 4 in the latest build. If you need all 6 of the old ones, you can go pull them from the old repository, and I'll give you the referencing for that as well. But in the end, you can do basically any type of site that looks like a search center just by bringing up a modern page and creating it. And we may try doing it. The one thing that I do is I don't usually globally install all the pieces for this, but you could do that and use them across sites because it has the ability to put a search box on one place and call it over to another location. And you can use, actually, there's ways to set up the out-of-the-box search box to send you to a search results page that also work. This was something introduced last year during a session in Ignite. So, and offhand, I do not have that link available, but it is out there. It's a couple of PowerShell commands you can run to change the way that search works in a modern site. So this is what we get to do the work. I'll just call out, there's 2 links on here down below, and they're actually, you'll find what you want for all the information around what I'm showing in the Microsoft-search it's not a repo, it's the site that contains 3 repos, and one of them is the search modern web part. So it's the PnP search modern search. The second link on here is the pre-built location, which gives you the release notes and where you can actually pull just a pre-built version with it or a static copy of the there's a zip file of the actual build, the source code, or you can do a get and pull all the code across. The 2 projects that are in there, there's actually 4 now. I'm not going to go into the 4th one, which is there's a Lewis website that you can add, and we'll talk a bit about what you can do with that. You can go build Lewis interface into the search components. You can actually use the Lewis portion of Azure to do some syntactical language lookup and do sort of like a synonym type support for your calls. The 4 pieces of the web parts, they're all built in a single project. There were 6 before. The 2 that have been removed as of March this year are the pagination, which is now part of the results. There's a couple of settings you can actually turn on and off the pagination support. Before it was done as a separate linked web part. And the last one is search navigation. Search navigation would be a nice one to have back. What search navigation allowed for is if you want to do separate search pages with significant configuration difference, you would go use the search navigation to switch the page at which you were looking at your search results on. This is all built now as a single page design where you're staying on the same page. And then you have a vertical search control, which lets you do different scopes of search, much like you have in a normal enterprise search design. So that's what that one is. Then you have a standard search results. Now, search results, what's unique about it is that it can actually be used as a content query web part as well. It's self-contained. You don't have to tie it to a search box and search queries. You can go build it out with its own query, build its own design, and actually make it a content query. and you can you run your own custom templates against it to get any type of rendering you want out of it. Now, custom rendering is done with handlebars. Not that hard to learn. If you've ever done any of that work, it's very good. And there's a number of helpers built into the component, so you get a lot of conversion available for you. The search filter is used to be called refiner. They now call it a filter. I'm not sure why the name was changed. It's in the logs, but now it's just treated like a filter. Maybe because it truly isn't a refiner in some ways. It's just a way to pull up your own custom refining values and click on them to get your results to be filtered. And then, of course, there's a search box. And the search box can be worked. It's an independent component, which is nice. You can actually set it up so it's on any page and target another page and pass the query through. And the search results the search box can also pull things from different locations. There's all kinds of different ways to use it. And there's many more than I could ever demonstrate. So it's one of those things you can try all the different combinations. The second component that's available in the project is the ability to create through code a custom renderer. There's two custom renderers available in it. One is the code renderer, which I'm not sure, I can't remember what it did now, and a person's render. So you can actually get like the person search, but it allows you to add into the actual selections, and you'll see how that gets used in a few minutes when I open up the process. This is a summary of what the capabilities of the product is really designed to do. This is straight from the site. If you go read the documentation, you'll find that this is what they're stating their current goals are. It's supposed to be a fully searchable, queryable, good for all content search web part. And that's one of the things it's supposed to start off with, which is what I called out. The other one is capable of doing the dynamic through a search box. It has a live templating engine with handlebars, which is very easy to use, and we'll see that. The search results include preview capabilities, so you can get preview boxes like you have seen before. You can get mouse over capabilities, that type of stuff, pop-ups. You can control the sort of your results, which is something you want to be able to do with any field that you can index, and that's custom fields. So if you've gone through and created custom search properties, you can actually, with the ability to order things, you can go leverage that. It has pagination built in, so you get the results and the paging, you can get a totals out of it. The piece that I'm not going to get into, which is that second last bullet, which is the search query enhancements with the I can't remember, NLP tools of Lewis, which is, I know I've worked with it before, I just can't remember off the top of my head. And it's one of the things you want to do a little bit more with, but if I had more time, I'd do it. And again, it's designed as an extensibility model. So it's not just controlling, giving you a set. If you're really into it, you can go develop add-ins for it yourself. And there's the link to the documentation. The documentation isn't quite up to date in some areas to the latest stuff, but it is very good compared to what you've seen before. The old version that was made available prior to at the end of last year, I think the October build was the last one for it, had all the documentation as a single page in GitHub. It now has this website generated by GitHub in Git.io. So the documentation is actually part of the project, and it's full. The one thing I'd like to call it, this is an open source project. If you are really interested in getting involved, it's a place you can contribute. This is search through introduction. So again, this is some of the same stuff. It is built currently. The latest version is built with the 1.10 version of the framework, so it's completely up to date for framework. I'm trying to think of anything important here. Down there is the actual download. Again, the same release note target, and the bottom there is the issues list link. If you're all familiar with GitHub, you can actually, if you just go to the GitHub repository, you have both those links are available in the repo to get information. So the issues list and the latest releases and any of the pull requests. So if you're trying to figure out what people are changing every build, and it seems to be fairly active now as of March. So it looks like they're trying to get more releases out. I believe this is the April release I'm going to be working with. Sort of an indication of what you get. This big black box is actually, and it has the built-in editor that's used by Visual Studio Code integrated into it to actually do any editing. So this is why it's color coded. It's actually a part of the components, and you can actually open it and edit your handlebars. And handlebars, if you're not familiar, is basically XML that you're marking up. So it's the markup for it with a little bit of extra information thrown in, like these curly. Anything with the double curly brackets is replacement values. And so the example here would be the example of a supporting handlebars helper. Here's an example of get date created, and it's got LL. So it's telling you to take a value called created, convert it to a date, and use the LL format for it. Okay, so you actually can format your dates any way you want. You can control any of the output. It's showing get summary highlight. We'll see that in a second. Some of them are very long and hard to break down. I went through and broke them down before, but I have not revisited it since that point. So we just have a couple more slides to go. So what I wanted to do is in a demo was cover a lot of this area. So rather than talk about the bullets on here, I want to get to, additional links. This is the one thing when I call it. The second one that on this list here is a common problem. I do not know if it's been fixed since I dealt with it back in October. It may have been, which is custom crawl properties were not always being picked up on a site. This article goes through and explains how you can fix that. Usually you have to go through and add a user that's an admin to the site. And once that happens, you can get the site recrawled. It will then pick up the properties proper was the issue. And it goes through and explains the issue. This is somebody actually solved it based on Microsoft support, giving them information. This third link there is a video that goes back to March last year it's available up on YouTube, which walks you through some of the stuff I'm going to do. So if you need to find it again, and then the community, the second one was a community one that's been uploaded, and it's a little bit newer than the other one, covers some of the updated changes, and it's an indexed location in one of the community calls. So it's not actually the whole video, it's just one part of it where he did a quick demo. I think Frank, and I don't want to mess up Frank's name. I think it was he was on. Where is it? You know what? I think I took that slide out. Oh, there it is. Frank C. The other person that's heavily involved with this is this Waba. That's Swenson. Is it Stefan Swinson? He actually is Microsoft. He works in the search group. He is actually supporting it as well, and you'll see his name on the repos. So what I'm going to do is anybody have questions? Are you following any questions, Peter?
I haven't been. I did note, people should feel free to raise their hand if they want to pause and have a question. There are a couple there going to be sharing this content. Yes, I'm actually literally creating a YouTube channel for TSPUG that I'm putting up on the TSPUG page. So we're going to share the recording for this, and then Bill, if you can provide a link for the deck, I can post that up on the site as well. And then the other question from Russell was any idea on how you can find the last crawl date for a list? There was a REST URL I used to use to find that info, but can't find my notes.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never done that one before. I always push a new crawl all the time when I'm not sure. You can go into a list or a site and actually say re-index, and usually within SharePoint, they're pretty quick now online. I find that it gets usually re-indexed within 5 minutes.
Yeah, sometimes I even see it in the matter of 5 or 10 seconds, which is impressive.
Yeah, the adding in content, it comes through very quickly. So let's start with sites. It's the wrong one. I'm just going to throw up. I want to get that's what I want. So this is the site where you can find the source and the downloads. Off of here, you'll find the link. So this is the really only, you can get everything if you get this URL, which is the GitHub Microsoft Search. And if you go to that location, and in fact, this is where you're going to find anything coming from Microsoft on the new search they're providing. So there's going to be eventually some more projects in here, but this is the project that you're going to look for. And in here, the documentation is there, and all the web parts that they have are here. And there's a couple other projects. One is the custom refiners I talked about. There's a custom query enhancer, which I've not figured out what it does yet, and extensibility libraries. So there's a couple other projects to look at. One of these, I think the extensibility library is a Node application that actually allows you to use Lewis to do some of the lookups for you. So all that's documented in here somewhere. I have to use the word somewhere because I just haven't had the time to read everything that's in here. And then there's the documentation site, which is this one, which goes through all the pieces, how to get it installed, the information I covered. The link to the video, that one of the videos I talked about, this is the older one from March last year. And then they talk about how to get the web parts and build them. So there's a way to go through and do all that. The framework, important solution upgrades, what's happening with changes. And then you've got the components. If you go up, the way they do these sites, so then you've got your 6 web parts. So it does have references to the 2 I said are no longer, but basically they say they're no longer available in this version. And then in here, you're going to find all the information about every setting and what you can do with the settings. So in the search box, what your settings are. So if I go through this a little bit too quick, this is where you can find the detailed information on how to use it. Again, one of the things that isn't in here is how to get everything, all the gears to turn in the same direction, which is the interesting part of the process. I'm just going to leave one of these up, which is search results. Okay, that one. Because I want to come back to that. And then I'm going to go to this site. So this is a site I quickly built with the components. And we'll just start with how I got it in. This is, the components are deployed to a local site collection app catalog. So we go into site content, cover it. So I've installed this library, and I've installed the two components. One of them is the extensions, and the other one is the modern web parts. It's one package gives you all 4 of your web parts.
So Bill, I realized you could deploy multiple app catalogs specific to site collections. I always thought of it as a global thing.
No, you can build. There's a PowerShell command that lets you go and create the app catalog locally.
So if you know that app is only for that site collection, then just create it there.
Yeah, and just as a side, I've often done this. If I'm doing like a form that I'm only going to use in one location, rather than hide it across the whole catalog and have the issue, I'll go just drop it into one site.
Well, that makes sense.
So you're only using it in that site, and nobody can use it outside of that site.
Right.
Otherwise, the solution is to go to the globe, put it in the global, hide it, and then use various tools to get it added into a site. Then it works without anybody be able to add it anywhere else in any other site. So this gets around that problem. But this, I just deployed them scope this way. That way I could actually be running both versions in 2 different sites if I really wanted to look at the differences or try something out. But if I wanted to use the search box across the sites, I'd probably have to deploy it globally. So if I'm using 2 different site collections to do my work, but if I'm doing it all within one, I'm fine.
Okay.
So I've deployed them into here, and then unlike the global where you can actually say turn the auto activation on, even if they're set here, you can't do that. You then have to go back to your add application and add them to the application. So there's the 2 I've added. The customizer and the search are added in. Okay. So that's how they got added to my site. Now, if you're not familiar with the PowerShell command, don't worry. You can go throw them into your app store and application catalog, and then you'll see them everywhere. Let's go back to the page. So I also set this up. So I call it a search center, and I've made it my default page. So I just added a standard full screen page to my site. And then I've added the page, and let's throw it into edit mode so you can see what's on here. So I've actually thrown all 4 of the web parts are on here. The search box, the vertical search, my search box, my filter, and my results. Okay. So the 4 parts are all on there, and you actually go through and you connect them once you throw them on. So you'll see here, the search box doesn't connect to anything else directly from it, but it is search other places. The setting on here is critical. I'm trying to remember that's why it drives me crazy. It showed me you have 2 options. Use a dynamic search, and you can pull page environment, search verticals, which I think that might be why I'm having trouble. I think I have to switch to that one. And you do the vertical switch. And so you get a bunch of cascaded configurations to use here. I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to go back to the one I was using. And then in here, you get a placeholder, which is the text that shows up in your search box. And you get the ability, if you're doing a new page, so if you did the search box on a different page, you'd actually be able to go through and set up a targeted URL for the search box to be able to go to another page with your content, with your results showing up. So it lets you connect across using those settings. So we'll go back to my settings. Next up is the refiner. The refiner can be configured 2 ways. One is a vertical or as a panel. So if you were looking at a real estate issue and you want it to be panelized, you could use the panel, and therefore it'll fly out from the right side and you get a panel of your selections, or a vertical. The vertical is the one we're more familiar with. I have not figured out how to do this so I can get more real estate. I guess I could switch this over. I've used the full length panel on the right. Sometimes if you've got a lot of metadata, I had one case where we have like 100 some odd possible values for one of the metadata that it gets very long and wrap issues show up. That was happening on the old one. I still want to see what happens with the new one, whether they fix that issue. But from here, you don't see much more than that. The key one value here is the refiner settings. This is where you can go add your custom refiners to your list. So you can actually go, you give it the filter manage property. So the property that's taking from the search engine. If you're not familiar in 365, all refiners are more or less, they're called refinables. So there's refinable strings, I think 100 plus refinable string variables available, integers, Booleans. Someplace I have the list, but basically you can go through and you can actually go and assign your crawl properties to any one of these refiners, which give you the ability to use it as a refiner, and it lets you retrieve it. There's a lot of settings in the metadata. Something we won't cover here. If you're interested in more on the search configuration side, it's pretty much documented by Microsoft how you actually do your custom properties and set the metadata. But in 365, we don't get the ability to do a lot other than reuse what they give us. The exception to the rule is that we'll create a searchable property for your metadata fields, but you can't use them as refiners. They're just searchable. So you end up having to go do these refinable mappings to do it. And I may be able to show you one example of how I did that, because I think I had it working on here for the other one before. Good question. So some of this is an out-of-the-box taxonomy field. It's all the tags that come along with SharePoint. You then get the ability to do a templating. And the templating is interesting because you can actually do some modifications on the way that data comes out. The type of data it is and how you want to sort it, and ascending or descending on the data. So this is how your refiner will show the values that show up. Cancel that. And to add a new one, it's just in case you go open here and you get all the out-of-the-box fields that have been defined for you to use that have values. So there's a group ID field in there. I can go pull for a refiner. These are a lot of built-in stuff that I have for this project. A lot of stuff in here. And you'd find the refinables if you've defined them in that list. If you can't find them, you can actually just paste them in. So you can actually just go and set a value. I think there's a 10 one in there. So you can actually use that. It's the mapping for the property. So it's very helpful when you want to do any refiners. The next piece is I'm going to go to the, skip over the vertical for the time being, because it really is something that's extra, is the actual search box. This one is mappable. This is the one I talked about. You can use as a content query web part. So it lets you then set up how it's going to actually pick up the search results, where it's going to get them from as a default. You'll see that it added both the vertical and the filter in there. But normally if you have a search box on the page, that's where you're going to pull your data. It's just that it's not targeting specifically which one of these it's using. The other thing down here is I've got a default query. This is where you would use a default query if you're trying to template stuff and look at it. So if I just turn that all off, you'll see that my numbers on here went down to 0. So I'm going to put test back in here just so I have a value. And then I'm going to go to the next tab. So it's made out of 3 tabs. The next one you get, if you're doing queries without pulling from somewhere, you're going to be able to set up a query. You can use a result source specific for this. And the reason I call it resource sources, you'll need to look up the GUIDs, and that's where you would do some custom query capabilities in SharePoint search. If anybody's ever worked with that, you can go do best bet. You can do a lot of other stuff that shows up in there. And this component will pick that up. It might be where you configure for a content query example, and you just use the source for this. Or you can actually use it to pass through values. You can affect the sort order. So when you do this, you'll see all the lists and capabilities that we want to sort by. Editable field, edit sort fields capabilities. This is where you start to tie things back to the other locations. So you can see it, they call it refining web part. It's actually the filtering web part. They haven't changed the name in here yet, but it's basically how I tied the refiner or the filter in. The vertical bar also is a setting you turn on. So if I turn it off, I don't have a vertical bar tie in. You see it's got results showing up. Tie it back in. They go away because it's using the first selection here for the refining. So go back. Where I lost my mouse. Okay. The second one. This is include personal drive results. This is where you could go pull information from your OneDrive. There's a question that I know Eli is online now. Peter, have you seen him show up? You can actually do this. This is something new, and I have not tried this yet. But you can actually go pull, I guess, filter to get additional information from your personal OneDrive to do search results. This is a Pandora's box, selectable properties. You're going to see it blow up in a second.
So Bill, the personal OneDrive results, is that your OneDrive for Business or literally your personal OneDrive?
It would be your OneDrive for Business, I believe, is what they mean by that. That's what I take it to mean.
Yeah,
right.
Sure. Because obviously we do not index anything outside SharePoint implementation, so it is OneDrive for Business.
Yeah, that's what I would thought it would have been too. So I've just opened Pandora's box. This is all the fields that are retrievable showing up in the list. So there's all the fields that you would have defined that come out of the box that are retrievable, plus any ones that you've created yourself. These are a lot of ones I've created a while ago, and they're all retrievable. So this would allow you on a query to get all these fields back for use in a results page. So there's a lot more than you see on the page available. And I'm going to show you how you actually can see what you're getting in results in a second. There's a very helpful example on how to do that. And then refine filters, I believe, I'm not sure what that one does. That's new to me. Localization settings, so if you need localization support, you have that capability for language. So whichever language you're using. Synonym support, so you can go through and put translations for synonyms. cancel that. And then you can control how many results come back in a filter. So I think it goes up to up to 50. I have it at 10 in mine. So this will be with the pagination. And this piece down the bottom is new from the previous version since they took the pagination and web part out. This will let you turn on and off the pagination that'll be on your page, whether you want to show the ability to do last, first, next page, that type of stuff. And it's...
Sorry, Bill.
Yep.
Gaurav, sorry, I'm mispronouncing. Did you have a question? You had your hand up there.
Yeah, I have a question. Bill, this is Gaurav. If you little bit scroll up on your screen, so I'm talking about the selected properties. So if I'm searching in a particular document library and it has some metadata columns, are those metadata columns going to appear here?
Okay, so that's a little bit of a albatross, because you actually don't, you could, if they're retrievable properties that were set up in the crawl, I can't remember if all metadata properties are retrievable, but they need to be retrievable to get them to show up in here. Okay, that's the first condition. Yeah.
Bill, you'd have to set them up as managed properties explicitly, wouldn't you? Or do they just automatically show up?
You should, but they're not. If you're not refining, you'd have to go look at how the properties of the metadata were set up. And I can't remember if retrievable was one of the defaults. It might have been, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So you need to make sure it's a retrievable property. Once it's a retrievable property, you can pull it back. And it doesn't matter whether it's in this selection is for all possible fields that are, if they're available, it will pull them. If they're not available, it will just, they won't come back.
So are these on the managed properties then?
Yes, these are search properties.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't define these in the library, you define them in the search administration, right?
Yes. So basically, if I find a crawled property for that custom column, and if I create a managed property to it, associate them, and then I can search that, I can get that managed property here, correct?
Yeah, it's over. If you go over into your sites at the scope level of your farm, your tenant, your farm, and tenant, site collection, and web, you actually have this managed properties section. And these are all the managed properties that you can return if they're set as retrievable. This value here, you have to be able to retrieve them.
Okay,
that's the first thing. So you see here's one that's not retrievable. Okay, but it's queryable. So that means that you could query values of it, but you can't get it back to render in anything you want to do. Okay, so it must be retrievable. Once it's retrievable, you can actually format it into your results. Okay.
Got it.
There's a whole bunch. Now, the other side of it is the crawl properties. This is what the crawl process of search has picked up and created into the search corpus. But just because it's crawled, it doesn't mean it's exposed. Okay? So when you look at the list of properties that I've crawled, you'll see down the managed property map property side is that property can be mapped to more than one property in the property side of the search. Okay, and the reason it could be is that each of these properties retrieve a different have a different set of metadata settings for that property, whether it's retrievable, whether it's searchable, whether it's queryable, those type of things. And that's all part of learning how to use search. And you would do that no matter which version of search we're working with.
Bill, are you at your site collection level, or are you at your?
I'm in the site collect. Yeah, so I went to the site collection. It's a modern site, and I just went into the site collection, and I can see these settings under site collection and these settings for search under the web. Okay, so if you're a if you're an administrative user of the site collection, you have these settings. If you're just a web, you have these settings. These scope to this different level, and they're all a bunch of dials we can turn. So they're the there's query rules, there's result type sources, and I'll come back to result sources in a second. It's a very powerful, it's a way to build up a query set that you can actually reuse just by referencing. But the whole basis of it is I can do all my settings in here, okay?
But that search schema, how does that relate to the search schema that's managed at the tenant level?
It's actually a different, I believe the way they do it is they store it different from that of the tenant. if you wanted something globally in the tenant, you go to the tenant. Usually that's where I'm doing it for most of my work, is at the tenant. But you can go and actually create one that's just specific to that site collection.
So you could create a different managed property for the same refinable property name at the site collection level in a dozen different site collections. Those wouldn't conflict?
They shouldn't, but I've never tried doing that. There's so many refinables, I just use a new refinable. So if we go look at, let's go look, you were asking about that. If you go look at this one, won't have it.
Or do you see the ones from the other site collections in this?
No, you won't see them from the other site. You only see them from your parent house. So these are refinable dates. That's one of the other. It's refinable strings. Refine. So these are all my refinable strings. There's, did I spell that right? No, I didn't. Or no, I got it.
Yeah,
these are all the refinable strings that you actually can go configure. And you can see how there, if you configured crawl properties to them, you get them as sortable, refinable, retrievable, queryable, and multi-value support, which is a key. And they're all text. And there's literally, well, you can see it goes all the way up to 120, 100. So there's 130. I think it's a 200 and something of them. There's a lot of them. So you'll never run out of them.
Right.
And then you have a set for dates. There's less date ones than there are strings. So there's, I think, yeah, there's about 20 date ones, date intervals, date single. So there's a whole bunch of refinables that are all built into it. And from these, what you're able to do is map your crawl properties to it. So when you go in here and you click on it, let's go into one of these. You're able to go down and say, I think there's nothing you can really set. What you would do normally is you go and put an alias in for the field property if you didn't like using the word refinable, which means you can put a more targeted name in there. You can't reuse a name that's already in use, but you can put a new name in there. And then you can actually go and map in the mapping properties, which now we see over here. These are all your mappable values. And then you can find something. I don't think there's anything to test. No, nothing under there. HEW, my HEWs are next. So I can find all my crawl properties here and be able to use them. Okay. So that's how I bring them across. Then I use the refinable and even the alias to get my setting. So this is part of setting it up properly. I thought there was one setting here you get to set. No, there isn't. That's it. So it's preset, all these values. You can't generate new values so you can't create a brand new one from here. You can create a brand new one you can create a new property in the tenant, but that property, I believe, is certain values you cannot set when you create it. So it's not necessarily the best way to do this if you create new ones. I'd say if you're doing anything that's refinable, you want to set it up in here. Okay. Does that help you understand the process?
Yep.
It does, yeah.
Thank you.
So we got to the bottom of this. So basically these last three let you do pagination. I'll show you that, how it works in a few seconds. So this is the one I wanted to get to, which has the real good stuff in it. You put a title in for your web part if you want one. Show results of blank. So this is me right now it shows up as a background, but if I have no results, it works like a blank. Whether I want to show a count of my results, show up when I do a query. And these are pre-built templates. So there's a sample list template. Let's see that one in a second. I'll get some data so we can see it. There's a grid format, so like a tabular format. There is a document format. But the one that really is a carousel, which gives you the ability to do a carousel. So if you're doing content query and you wanted to put a carousel together of documents, you could use this as a content query and have a carousel with very little effort. There's the people search capability that's there. Debug, and this is, you'll see that the results are coming back in the debug without me ever doing a query. And what they've done nicely for us in the process is they've injected a lot of information about SharePoint into the returning results. So if you're trying to get colors, certain values from Microsoft that would have been in the site, or in the way you want to set things up. So you can see stored information, a lot of messages. So you can actually take these values and inject them into your results. Okay, so they're very helpful additional stuff. So when I get down to the bottom, you'll see there's no results actually in. So there's a place for results. Where did they put it? We'll see in a second when I actually do a query, but you'll see that it gives me a lot of information about everything that's in there. So there's a collection of preview image, how it works. So this is almost like a process. It's almost like a helper. You'll be able to how you can get your preview images for the URL, and it goes through and parses and puts that value in for you. They've done a lot of work without having you to have to do a lot of work in customizations. The last couple here is there is a custom one. Okay, custom lets us do some work around result sources and lets us do some edits. I want to switch this over so you see data before I go any further, but these last two here, persona and code renderer, is two add-in. This is the two extra renderers that came from that add-in that I put in. So they're injected into their extensions that actually go and hook into this actual web part. So you actually get those custom and it's all written in code as opposed to editability. So let's look at some results now. So I'm going to go back to the first page, back to this, not this one, and I'm going to unhook my verticals, this one. So we actually have some results. Oh, that's I hit the wrong one. No. What is my, okay. Let's look for nice word to test. Why is it not working? Sorry. Go back. Close this. Go cheat and we'll do that way. So this is actually, let's just cover this one quickly just so you understand how I got these values. This is done again through a view of what we're seeing. So what happens in this one is you can go set up different search results of targeted results identities. So where you go build the query up for the base, and we can go look at some of these as the video, the people, and documents, which is, I think, the one that does recent changes. So these queries are built up outside of this. And I'm going to go back to this one and go back to here. I may not go. Oh, because we're in search properties, collection min. This is coming from result types. Or actually sources, sorry, not types. So the documentation one is this one. And you can add your own to this list. But the basis is they go through, you're telling it where you're getting the data from, the results you're looking at, whether it's SharePoint results or people results. This one's that, and then this is the query that's actually being executed in here when you use that result source. So you go build it out. So if we actually go, and it's tied through this ID up here. So this it's got an ID. This ID is the one they're actually using in the view to tie it together. So you look them up by ID is the way they do the calls. If we go back one screen, I'll show you what you get. So we do a new result source. Description, SharePoint, all that. You'll see that the search term here is the search term passed to this. And if you go build out the query, fill with the old query capability. It's going to take a second to pull it. I can go build my query out of here. So the search term comes in. I can go set a path and specify a certain location in SharePoint, so I can filter down to point at a document library and just search that one document library, which is what we're doing with my work. Yes, go ahead.
This looks just like the old content search web part, doesn't it?
Yes. This is setting up a result source so that we can actually go and leverage this query as part of our bigger query. Okay. So when somebody puts something in, they don't have to know all these fancy ways of doing it. The other piece that's tied, so we can test the query from here. So we all this. So if you're familiar with any of this interface, you have testability. So a second's going to bring up a dialog for me to put that value in. You can actually go pull values from defaults very quickly, so you don't have to know how to put it all in. Some of the stuff will actually show more properties. These are other properties that you can actually use in your query. So this can build up a base query for you to use for one of your tabs in the design. And I'll have to bring up the one for my customer because that one has a complete version of it. But yeah, sort capabilities for what you're doing, and then the test results over here. So you can actually build up a query, and what you want to do is then take this GUID over here and go add it as a tab in your in the navigational control for different targets. So when we look at, we go back to this, these three values, that's where they're coming from, is they've all come from having result sources configured for them. Okay, and that's what we're seeing here, is these result source GUIDs here. And then you can put an icon beside it, which is based on the UI fabric icons. And then I guess you can put a hyperlink. This is new, and I have to check. I believe you put this in, you can actually, this might be where they change it so I can actually target a different page when I do this particular query. That's what it looks like. Yeah, so I can actually go and send it to another page so that I can have a different set of ways of doing the rendering. So example being, if I'm doing people search, I don't want my results for the web part to look like a document view. I want it to look like people. So you would go target a different. So this is actually replacing the old navigational support. Learning on the fly. So we're talking about this before. We can now have some data, so we can see the refiner. These are some of the refiners that are coming up by default. So the size of the file, the grade dates are available. And I don't remember how that looks. We'll have to look at it. But the key was I was talking about how it would look different. So you actually get the filters here would actually now fly out as a panel versus the ones that are in line with the rendering. Should come back to this in a second. What I want to do is go back to this one now. We've covered it. And if we look at the way this sets up over here, so that's the sample list view, simple view. This is the detailed, so it looks like a grid, often what you'd see in a content query web part. You can grid it, and with the grid, you actually get some column management over here, which lets you do all your columns for what they're going to show up in the results. And within here, you get, see in this example here, you get to do some handlebars formatting. So this is formatting the date for you. So you get a nice date instead of the out of the box date look. So once you turn this on, you can do some formatting. So if I wanted this to be bold, I can do all that with it. This is just simple little blocks of handlebars to do it. Okay. You set your column width, maximums, you get some settings. You then get, in this case, using this view, whether it's sortable, refined, resizable, multi-value, and item link should show up. So this is the item link, should be tied to this. So they generate my cancel. So they're generating this view with all of this in it. Okay, the other thing that's in here. Go ahead.
Well, does it have filters?
Yeah, the
filter also. Like I thought.
The refiner will give you filtering at the same time, or you can go embed it in here to do your filtering. Okay. Okay. So if I go close this, do this, so you can see what's going on here. So you see the view there, and I go to here and I select, drop down, I go, actually I think all the dates are good here. Let's go with size. Oops, So
Are the column headings have does the column heading have filter or
no,
something?
there's no
Like
column
as
heading.
no?
Yeah, there's no filtering
Okay.
on the columns.
It's only
You'd have
only
to have
sort.
a refinable field in there for that to work, and they didn't. So basically, you'd do it through a refiner. But you can see I can change the
Okay.
sort order here, right? So
Yeah.
I can go talk.
Yeah.
So I have that capability in the way it works. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's just out of the box. That's not doing anything custom. Okay.
Yeah.
Go back and do the edit on this. Back to this one. Come on. It's a funny thing about my page. It doesn't always let me get to this one. Oh, choosing the first one. Okay, so back to this view. So that's that view. This is the tiled view, okay, which lets me do tiles of documents. Okay, the carousel view, which lets you do a single line and scroll through them. Again, these would be more helpful if you're doing something like a content query equivalent and you weren't doing a search. You wanted certain documents from certain locations to show up through that process. The people, which I don't have any people results for, so you don't see it, but it's the people results view. Here you can see the pagination on the bottom I was mentioning earlier. So that you can do page through it. Actually, go back to something I had, summary on the bottom. So we were talking about pagination before. Your pagination is going to show up here. You can move to last stage. As you step through each of these, you can then go and move backwards and forward, just like a normal pagination. Or you can turn this off, which is what you would do if you're doing content query. You didn't want to have anybody walk through your code. People, come back to debug. Persona, I don't have anything for. This is the code view. So this is a slightly different view built out in code. So you can see here we have a different layout. This doesn't let us, yeah. So this only lets us put headings in. I'm not sure. I have to go look at the code. Custom is pretty straightforward and simple, but the custom, and I talked about earlier in the handlebars, in this example, you can actually put, if you wanted to, you can put a URL in that had your handlebars in it. But if we go and click on the little brackets, this is the handlebars code that did this rendering that's available. So you can see all the pieces that get run through this to do the layout. You can see that it actually, you can put style blocks in and reference your styles throughout. It's doing substitution of, I was talking about before, where you're getting the at root, which is all the stuff that came back in the debug. You're getting the theme values, so your code can look consistent to the theme. And then we're just seeing standard markup for anything we want. So there's a fabric icon support. So these are fabric icons that are coming up. And then there's brackets like here. There's the begin. So in handlebars, you have the concept of looking at collections of information. So we see results here, type, and rendering this block repeatedly. Actually, the for each is the one I wanted. So this is saying all the items that came back, for each of them as an item, go and actually implement this block of code as a repeatable block. And its count is actually managed by the count you gave for the page and what you're retrieving. So you only have to worry about how you want to render within this section, this div block, how you want to actually render your search results. Okay. Down here, we're doing some of the pagination. So we turn all the pagination off, none of it shows up. So this is the, if I took this piece of code out of this one, it would not show up. And it's doing an if condition. So you have the if capabilities in your code to turn things on and off based on values you find. And this is the blanking. So when it's a blank, it's going to, so I think the else on this one. So if it has no result, has results, do this. If it doesn't have results, treat it as a blank output. The placeholder is a different piece of code. And off the top of my head, I know this, but I'm getting a little bit deep into handlebars for this. It's another way of handling all the pieces as they render. So you have full control. This is an editor, so we can edit and add anything we wanted in here. Okay, that's that one. The first one, I did have some settings. Again, oh, actually, there's the same handlebars for that first one that we had, which is pretty much the same thing. Detail view we saw. Tile view is a little bit different. The tile view is an information card. So you're able to use the information card layout, which is here's all your fields in the information card for output, and you can map the fields that you want into each one of those fields as an output. So if you had custom content that you wanted to show a different way than the normal document, you could actually go through to this, and you can see how some of it is actually formatable fields, like the profile image. There's a piece of handlebars code for it. Okay. If you're new to handlebars, it's not that hard to do. The site that's out there is very good at explaining the basics. It's just as simple as understanding you're replacing values within a string. So you can see this one, this is using a helper, which is why it has 3 brackets on it. So it's saying pick up this helper and the item and make the appropriate rendering for that item. What else? We got simple ones. Get URL. So if you're ever familiar with the way links work, right, you always have 2 pieces to your link. You have a URL for it and you have the description. This actually knows how to parse that for you so you get the correct output. Author is pretty straightforward. It's going to be the author field, so you don't have to do anything special for it. Source icon is a field that came back, icon extension. So those things are all formattable. This is just the ability to see it in a tabular or a called tabular view. You get the same thing happening if you go over to the, if you're looking at this one and we looked at the markup, oops, that's results. This one. This is the same thing you're building up in here. Okay. So we look at a field in here. There's the description field being replaced in that div tag. The title, the URL. So it's building on a URL with the title. A lot of this is very helpful to see in the actual examples they give you. Another thing I wanted to go back to the debug. So in the debug, we now see there's your items that you return from the search. I was telling you, how do you find the fields that you actually can render? So these are all the things that are coming back with each item. So the collection of items. Not scrolling from the mouse. Scroll menu. So that's all the fields that came back for that one item. You'll see there. So the title, the path that it's in, the file name, logo if there's one. These are null. And there's a way to test in the if conditions. You can test for null, so you can decide whether you're going to render something or not. Parent link, all the standard stuff you'd see in any search query is coming back. And any fields that you add to it would also be showing in here. Okay. So this is all available for helping you build out your stuff, and then you can take the fields over and use them. So I would say grab a copy of this and put it in a JSON markup, and then you'll have it as a reference. And you can actually, there's a Handlebars templating engine actually for Visual Studio Code you can integrate together. And therefore you could do your whole template without ever bringing it over here, because the structure references use the same information you see in this. So you'll see the root is the actual reference to the root of this, and then everything comes off of this. So there's a structure to it. And it's just returning one big JSON object that's being sent to your template, and your template pulls the values out. So it's not hard to use. Somebody had a question?
Yes, I have one. This is Kavita here.
Yes.
So can you have a different layout for verticals?
What do you mean?
So you had 3 verticals, I guess, the all or documents, and then people, and then the 3 tabs at the top, the verticals.
Oh yes, you could.
So you have a different sources you showed, right? Like different sources. Can we choose different layout per vertical? Have you tried that?
No, you would have to create a different page with a different layout result.
Mm-hmm.
Let me bring that back up off of mine. So what you would do is up in the vertical settings up here. Actually, what did I do? There. This one here, and this is new, so I'm not quite sure. There used to be another control, and they've wrapped it into this. And since lately, is I would go and say, okay, on this one here, if I wanted actually with people, I would put another targeted page in my site and
redirect to that page. Yeah,
and it will do a redirect to that. Yeah. So
yeah,
what you do is you do all the configuration and reproduce it in both locations. And then on the other ones, when you click on those, you'd send it back to the page that had the layout for it. So it's similar to what you can do in the original Search Center. You'd have to do the same thing. If I was going to do 3 different renderings, I need 3 different pages.
right?
So this just gives you that same ability, and you do it when you tie it to the result sources, because each one is going to come back with different information by its scope. Therefore, you can actually go set up the whole search results to be specific to that result set.
Actually, what Mama is doing is right, Dad.
And the content sources are defined in the Enterprise Search Center, right? Not at the site collection level.
They can be done at all levels: site collection, site, and the tenant.
But how do you target the one?
Yeah, when this runs,
crawling,
it always targets.
Sorry.
Yeah, it always targets the URL that the components are added to. So if you wanted to create, if you wanted a result source specific to the site you're working with, that's where you'll have to set it up. If it's not, if you want to set it up globally so you can reuse it other places, then you do it as a tenant. So it's up to you where you want to do it. And it also comes down to who has what permission. So if I'm doing something like this and I'm only a site collection owner, I'd have to do it in the web. If I'm a owner of the site itself, then I can actually, what be the equivalent of a member, then I can actually do it in the site collection. And if I'm tenant admin, I can go do it over in search engine. So it depends on what scope you have access to, but it won't block you. You can do the exact same thing in all 3 places.
Okay.
Hey, Bill, this is Gaurav again. Just two questions. First, the JSON you are showing, right? I see that the rank, doc ID, title, path. Are these the managed properties?
Which ones? Oh, in this rendering here?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all search properties.
Search properties, okay.
That are coming back.
Okay. And the other question I have, like if you go to the detail list view, does it provide us the document preview?
Oh, you want it off of the, let's go back to this one. So you're talking about this one?
Like details list, yeah.
Yeah, if I want to add additional fields, I can add additional fields to this or change
No,
the field.
I mean, if you hover on the document, does it provide the preview of it?
Not in this one, but you can create that. It is a way to actually go ahead. Actually, I didn't go over in this one. You can actually get it off of this one. Actually, let me go. I'll have to go back to run the actual. Close this one. Save this. When I click here, you'll see it pops up a preview panel. What I want to do is I'm going to show you my customers example. Just so you get of how you can actually get it to work, because it is far more elaborate. And there's a lot of hours put into building it. It's got to go. It's in another. So I can bring it off of this one. It's going to open the other tenant. Where are you? Where are you? Here. I know you're here because I use it all the time. Yeah, and then we go here. Give me a second. It's just pulling up that location. We actually embedded into a common site. Okay. search page. Okay, so this is an example of a working version. In this case, I want to search for pump. I know is a very common word because these guys are in the water business. So I type in pump. You'll see that we have these are different folders of or libraries of documents. So they're general business, reference documents, and closed project documents. And you can see here it's brought up a thumbnail, and I can see the thumbnail. And off of here I can blow it up. I can actually page through it. It's only a single page, so it's hard to do that one. Let's close that one. Do a multi-page. No, they're all one page, sorry. But from here I can actually open the document. Right? If I blow it up, it's going to go open up in Word. So that's built into the out-of-the-box templating. Okay. The other thing that's in there is this has some custom properties, and I can't remember which one. Yeah, there we go. So this one has a bunch of custom. So document type I'm pulling up, which is a managed metadata field. Source of the data, year of the data. So I can actually pull the filtered. So there's 3 documents for that year showing up. They're PDFs. I can look at the PDF. I can actually print the PDF from this view. So this is all built into what we're getting out of the component. This is using, by the way, this is using the October version, not the current one I just demoed. So it has a few differences in it. If we go back and look at the edit of this quickly, you'll see that I have the one piece here, and I have one additional one at the bottom. Oh, I have the pagination that they used to keep separate up here. I had it at the top instead of the bottom. The new one only supports it on the bottom. So it's a separate part that you actually link together. And you were asking about how these work. They're set up against different result sources that I created for targeting the actual path to those locations. So we just look at the configuration. All I've done is thrown the GUID up here, put the library through, pass through the search term to the query. And if we go back to discard changes. Why is it taking so long? Oh, there we go. Yes. We go back to the site itself, site settings, so you get an idea, site information, site settings. I go look at my result sources here. There's my 3 custom result sources. Closed projects. Pretty much standard there. And this one I believe I created all these at the tenant level, so they're not actually editable here, but there you can see them. All it is putting in a path. I just added the path to the location of the library that I want to search for that. The overlap of results that are returned are the same for all of them. If I need to add additional returning information, I would just go add the fields for any one specific set of data, and then I'd have them all come back. All the results would come back the same way. So it's more of an example how you actually link it out. So I'm creating this one. These are tenant, so you can see it's tenant created. These are the ones from SharePoint, and I can add ones at this level as well. And I can add at the level of the web. So I can see all my parents and myself, and they're always available. Because it's a simple process. You go throw one of these into your system, and you grab the GUID that it created, and you now have a new tab that you can actually tie together out of the site. Go back to the search page. Does that help understand how all the pieces fit together? So there's my pagination on this one. And when I did the query, because all these, it's telling me how many I get back from each one of the different queries on the system. And if it doesn't have a render, it won't show up here. Oh, there it goes. Sometimes these are a bit late. This is just using standard calls in SharePoint to get the rendering support for the view. So if you looked at the handlebars code, we'd actually see where they actually put this piece of the code in. Okay. And so this one, I believe, this is the one I had the trouble with because projects is a very long list. So this is a custom meta property that I now retrieve for filtering for all the projects. Because it gets into it's got a problem with the scroll when you have so many values.
Bill, are you able to trim, only show me the top 20 filters or something like that?
Not in this version. It's something I want to look at in the new one. It's one of those areas that I had to look at. So document types. So I'm looking at all the extensions. So I want to find out all my message files. There's 15 text files. So I can find the 15 text files. You see text don't have a thumbnail, so I don't get that option. Filter.
So that's no setting in the refiner when you set the refiner, because in the on-premise version you could set, right?
Yeah, there isn't as much control. That's why they call it a filter control now. It's no longer called a refiner. I think that's one of the reasons, is that in general, this is just ability to put a number of references to the refinement capability. So if I go back over to here and look at my edit, why am I not getting, let me put an edit here. It's not letting me. Let's reload it. There we go. So I look at my refiners on here. It's only letting me do sort order, and this tells me how I want it to show up when it opens. So these are all collapsed. Expand filter. So I have, in some cases, I have so there's the I was showing you before where you have these two different refiners for system, because the two different result sources have two different refiner capabilities. So by putting this in one location has 3 values, another location has 2 values. So in order for that to work, you have to put it in as the same value twice. But because it's targeted specifically to one of the result sources, it's only going to show up with one system value. So this has to contain all your refiners for all your different queries. This is where, again, where you're using a different page to do this would actually be more useful, because you know what the refiners are for that particular layout that you want. So you can build it out. I think based on what I'm seeing now is actually better and closer to that of the original SharePoint product for search centers now than it was in this version. Because I don't get to, if I go back to my this vertical, look, I don't get to set a targeted URL for any of these. So instead, I have a different web part that would have done that, which I would not. I'd use that instead of this one, and then just use different targeted locations, and then. But in this case, because all my data is pretty much the same thing as documents we're searching in specific libraries, that worked out this way. Okay. Okay. Republish, because I know I'm going to mess somebody up if I don't republish it. Okay, so that's really an example of using the search capabilities in SharePoint in the new modern. Anything else somebody wanted to understand how to use, or? Oh,
I do want to say this is all very cool. Like I sorely missed the search center customization of classic and modern, and didn't realize how far they'd come with the PNP stuff in terms of bringing that forward. So I'm pretty keen to start kicking the tires on that.
Yeah, there are some PowerShell settings. Where's my screen? I lost my screen for this one. There. So there are some settings to be able to change this search up here. Okay. The only thing you can't do in the search is re-reference the same page from here. But there's some settings in PowerShell that let you make the changes to this search, so you can actually target your own page. Currently, it always targets the out-of-the-box search page. You can actually get it to target one of these search result pages, and if you go set it up so it pulls its query from the K value in the URI, you can actually leverage it just the way you do in out of the box. And that's covered by Michael Swenson, does cover that from the Ignite conference video from last year.
So does that let you take over Microsoft Search in general or just in SharePoint?
This is the online version of SharePoint. You can actually do those changes. Okay. And I think you can turn it off. You can turn it off on sites as well. So if you, in this case, he went through and gave an example how you turn it off and you wouldn't have it on a page for when you're doing. Now, this is a site setting, so you'd lose it on all your sites. But if you're doing a search center,
interesting, because we had a client who hasn't seen that show up on their site, and we're trying to figure out where is it turned off, and we didn't seem to see a setting for that.
Okay, this is where it's going to go by automatic, but previously it was up in the top, up here in the top of the page, I think up here. So what they've done is they've moved it from here to here into a universal location now. But it's the same search box in the end.
If somebody doesn't see it, how do they turn it on?
Let me go quickly. I'll go find the values.
It's just through PowerShell, or is it through the GUI?
Yeah, there's in PHP PowerShell, there are some settings for it. So let's go. I'll bring up this one quickly. Geez, yeah.
Just pasted the link to it in the chat.
Oh, you found it? Okay. PNP. I'm just doing a quick.
Okay, got it. Thanks. Yeah, Russell put the link in there.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the. This one I close. So there's a bunch of settings in here in PNP.
Yeah, there's a set PNP search settings, the second from the bottom.
Yeah. So this one here. I don't know if they've added examples yet. We'll see. Yeah, so there's a bunch of examples on how what you can do with it. Hide it, change this. Yeah, actually, that's the other thing is, by default, that search box is kind of funny. It normally is. It can be scoped different result sets. The exception being is the new home page that you can create is a tenant-wide search, where all the other ones, I believe, are site scope by default.
Right.
Okay. Well, you can go in with this setting, change it to tenant. Example 6 there. And you can also do it to a hub search. You want to do it to a hub search. But this is controlling just the out-of-the-box search capabilities. Okay. There's another setting in there. I think it's this one, PNP search configuration. Oops. Fat fingers. Help. Other examples. This one, I believe, does subscribe. I'm trying to remember what this one does. This is different. I mean, I think of another one. Invoke tenant. Invoke search query is an interesting one. It lets you run search queries from PowerShell. There's a submit as well. So there's always submit and invoke. You wonder where the difference is, but I believe this one lets you do some settings related to, I'm trying to figure what they are. Set search configuration for current site collection. Yeah, so this does a little bit, this changes configuration in a different way. So this is where you can set for tenant. Configuration for selected XML files. Yeah, there's a, I'm trying to remember the setting, but there's a way to go do some other stuff. But if you go back to the other one, there's ways to turn off this. So there's hide it. There's scopes. There's a couple of other settings in there, and that's covered. It got added end of last year, I think in October timeframe. So before one of these settings was added before it was actually doing anything. Now that it's all rolled out, it actually does what it's supposed to. But that's another piece of actually working with something like this, is you want to be able to control the way your tenant behaves. So I hope with that, everybody's gotten enough value out of my session. I guess we rose up an hour and a half.
That was great. Thank you, Bill.
Can I ask one last question?
Yeah, and open for questions. Keep going.
Absolutely.
Sorry for my kids playing games in the background. Can you go back to the which setting was it? You had the refiners set so that multiple refiners mapped to the same name from different result sources. Can you configure your refiners for me?
Yeah,
I think I can clarify my question more clearly if.
Yeah, let me just find. Now you got too many browsers open. I'm trying to remember which browser that was in. When you open it,
playing with this tool myself, and it's awesome. And thank you. You've showed me a whole bunch of things I haven't explored yet.
Yeah, some of what if you go to the 2 video links that I provided, they actually go through a little bit more detail on some of them. But the problem being is it's changed a lot since those videos were done. So you do have to follow the changes they've made. Just trying to find my. Where is that screen?
Yeah, I've used a lot of
this
but
one.
I haven't used the refiners yet. So you showed me something that piqued my interest because I can.
Okay, so over here is my refiner. In this one, I've set up a lot of refiners. So I've defined refinable property, which if I go look it up is mapped to a specific metadata field that I've created. Same with there's in this case, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fields that are being used. So project, year, source, document type. So that's how I've gotten the values back as retrievable. And all I've done, and these are just display names when it comes up.
Right. So you have refinable string 11 and 21, both showing up with the name of system.
Yes.
So that appears to the user as one filter.
No.
Or one refiner?
They come from 2 different result sources that I'm referencing. So there's a content type in 2 different result sources that have a system value. And the reason there's 2 of them is one has 3 and one has 2 values.
Right, but to the user, it appears as one, right? You don't see 2 separate.
Yeah, because we don't return result. The way it's set up, you wouldn't return results from both locations at the same time. If I did return them from both, you'd see 2 system values.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
darn, I was hoping that worked the other way.
Refine string 11 would only appear in one of the result sources, and 12 would return in another result source. But you'd see system, but they have similar values. 2 of them are the same value, and there's one extra one on the second one.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Now, what you're asking to do, if you wanted to merge from different locations, all you do is go create a new refinable that has all your values in it.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
And then you can just put it in once. I could have done that for this case, but when we set it up, we wanted, well, one case it's a multi-value and the other one it isn't a multi-value. That was one of the reasons that was separated. Right. So in one case it can have 2 values, and the way it renders, it's you can select more than one of them from the list in a multi-value. In the other case, you can't have multi-value, so you can never select 2 values. It's an invalid condition.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Hey, I assume you use the SharePoint search query tool when you develop this stuff?
Yes, I've used that heavily. That's another thing I didn't point out to those that are new, is to go get from the tools and PMP. It's in the solutions of PMP. So you can get that out of GitHub /PMP/solutions, I believe it is. There's a longer name for it, but if you just search for solutions when you're in that location, you'll find it. And if you look at all the solutions, you have to pull them all out to get to them, but then you'll find one for doing a query tool, and you go pull that copy out and do your work with that. And that
Yeah,
lets you do the base queries, and then you get everything right. There's actually something I read in an article, or somebody was in a video, they pointed out, there's something you should do with your queries when you're doing that to prevent people from actually affecting it by changing settings in your site. And I can't remember, it's a reference you add to your queries so they can never be overwritten so that people can't filter out stuff on you through another process. There's a way to specify what, I think it's the actual result source that you want to use. There's a generic result source and guarantees that there's no queries in the middle.
I have to look into that. Thank you.
So you've been using this and it works well for you?
Yeah, it's working fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, when
I haven't done those result sources, I haven't used that, but I have some ideas because we have our organization, a hierarchical organization, where we want to have documents organized by geography, and I can create separate result sources for each geography and use result sources to let them drill down. So I've got some good ideas from your presentation. Yeah. Thank you again.
Yeah. If you go back, I'm assuming you're using the same version I have here, which is the October version for last year.
I'm not sure which I have.
Okay, I don't know if you were on the call at the beginning. There's now 2 versions and 2 different locations where you pull it from. This has the 6 web parts in it, separate, so they're all separate. Where the new one has only the 4, which was where I was demoing from, because that's this one here.
That's the one I have, the one with the 4, yeah.
Yeah, the one with the 4 is a little bit different, but as far as the result sources, they work the same. They just call it filters now.
Yep. How can I reach you if I have some questions? I may want to pick your brain and perhaps share ideas.
You can get me at billbrockbank.net.
Cool, thank you.
Anybody else?
Hey, Bill. So what's the custom development options? Like, do you have any, any specific way you can use Graph API or any other?
You could go and do all that if you want to be aggressive, because the source, which I have, it's on here somewhere. Where's my So this is the custom refiners project, which is built out as extensions. So we're talking about the code renderer and the persona renderer. So what this is all done in, if you're familiar with React layout, you can do a React layout for all your stuff, and this integrates as an extension that will hook into the actual result sources to add it as an option. This is a little bit more advanced for most people than normal, but it's, if you had a condition where you wanted to pull additional information along with it, say for instance you do want to pull something specifically from Graph to work with your render, you could use a custom renderer to do that. Okay. The other project that is out there is the one, there's 4 of them. If you go to the source, you'll see it, is this one, which is the, and I was just looking up the version. This is the web parts. And if we go to source web parts, there we go, web parts. There's your 4 web parts. You have full access. It's all open source. You have full access. If you feel what you're doing is interesting to everybody, you can go push it out as a pull request, and they can roll in your changes if you wanted to integrate something in that way. The other place, if you, from this point of view, all the if you wanted to find all that handlebars code, it'll all be in here somewhere. I can't remember where they put it, maybe in providers, but there's a bunch of handlebars in here, the source somewhere. You have to go looking for. But the other one is, I wanted to check, I'm not sure whether this version was set up to work with Teams now. I wanted to check. So if anybody built a Teams web component, you'd know. Source web parts, where's my manifest? Oh, they're in here. Okay. Manifest. And JSON to manifest. Where's this setting? No, they're currently only hosted as SharePoint web parts. So if you wanted to bring this over, you go modify it and add. It's available here. Teams tab support for it. So if you, so example is the web part. I just pulled the search. Well, that's the search box. Actually, let's go look at that. that would be interesting is the results. Does the results support? Yeah. So if you want to use a content query type web part in a tab in Teams, all you'd have to do is go add the appropriate settings here to make it a Teams tab. Now, if you rebuilt this, you'd actually be able to use it for a Teams tab. I don't believe it. None of this uses graph today. Lots of external references. Yeah, because it would be in here if the graph settings were required. There's no, if I got the right one. That's the right one. Code assets. Jeez, where's it? Package JSON. It might be in, but there's no graph integrated into it. I believe probably you'll look at and you'll see once the graph search is more mature from beta, it will actually probably integrate an example of how to get to data from graph. But for the time being, they're just querying the standard REST call into the graph. And if you're trying to figure out, if you're very aggressive and you understand how to read all the code, you should be able to find everything in the interfaces that are provided within the code here. Good luck. So our vertical component renderers in here. Again, if you want your own custom version, just go pull a copy of this, put it in your own repo, and start building your own custom code, and you'd have a custom version. And then, like I said, if you really got it down, so you've got something worth everybody having, you go do a pull request and give them the code. I believe it is under an MIT license, if I recall correctly. License, where are you? Oh, they didn't put it in here. Normally people add the license in here. But there is, I believe on the site it says it's MIT. So that means you can reuse it as much as you want, rename it, whatever, if you're aggressive.
Hey, I have another question. Are you aware of a repository of custom handlebar templates that people have developed that may share ideas with other folks?
No, I haven't seen that. I'm used to built up a whole system that used it years ago, where we would do the queries ourselves and then build a template out of the JSON for the or the markup for the template, and then we just marry the two. But if you go to if you search for handlebars in actually it's a Nugget package in NPM, and then there you'll get the link to its documentation site.
Yeah, handlebarsjs.com will get you there. The beauty of handlebars is it's actually pretty simple. Like once you get your head around it, creating those templates is not too tough, which is the beauty of it.
Yeah, and it actually, if you look at adaptive cards, it's very close to the same model.
Oh, is it? Interesting.
Yeah, they're actually doing the same thing with their data connector. They're actually taking a template and the data and then throwing them into a process in JavaScript that generates the output.
And then someone developed a template, I think, that renders adaptive cards in the search engine.
You could do that, yes.
Yeah, I thought I saw that recently.
Oh, that's cool. So you could make actionable results, basically.
Yeah, right in the search engine.
Yeah. You should be able to do all that stuff, because basically you've got a renderer that does almost anything you want. You could have it render a form if you wanted, because handlebars will support that. As long as the markup that you produce is markup that has the supporting elements provided on the page, it will generate it. Now, if you want to do a little bit more extensibility, the easier way to do it is just go create your own custom extension, and then you could do anything you wanted, and you'd have full control over the code. You wouldn't have to deal with the handlebars. You could do all in React.
Yeah, I heard the handlebars templates you can reach a point and you can't go further.
Yeah, because you can't do any additional queries or calls in your process.
Right. I can't make any REST calls.
Yes, I can. Yeah, but in a renderer, I could do that. I can also bring up other types of templates that are not supported.
Okay.
But in the end, it's still going to hand in the process. It's going to still hand over the same data to your renderer that you would get inside of the search engine that Handlebars uses.
Okay.
So I hope everybody has an interest in this now.
I know
Good
I
stuff.
That was my goal, is to get more people interested in it. So I have somebody to go to when I have a problem.
do. Mission accomplished.
Thanks, Bill. So one more question I have. This is
Yep.
Kavita here again. So for the refiners, there is a limitation on the number of results, but when you had a search results of only three results, the filters were still showing all of it, right?
Yeah, they're independent of the results.
So then if somebody selects the filter that doesn't have a value.
No, they will not show up. The values in the filter you have values, you have content for. There's always
Also, those filters will only show up if they are within those three results.
Yeah, just so you understand the way search works, right? Is it actually is another query to get that information that's coming from SharePoint.
Right, right.
So if you ever use the search tool, the one we were talking about, you'd see a place where it gives you the refiners back.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is those refiners all have counts against them, how many items you have for each one. So they're just showing the count along with it. So that means if there's no count, it's one item. But if there's multiple items, you'll see it.
Yeah, but if it no count means there's no item and it won't show, right? Hopefully.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And the difference in the refiner capabilities is if you want to be able to select more than one refiner to get more than one set of data back, you'll have to make sure it's a multi-select.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
These issues are the same ones you have in Classic Search Center. They just
No, I thought, no, that's true, but I thought I saw more than the search results. That's why I was surprised to see.
Yeah,
I have developed it in Classic 1 and only shows the relevant filters, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit more restrictive. It will show like 5 of each by default. And there's a way to do this one so it's 5 only. But again, if you want to do more with that, you could actually go, the source code is available. You go change refining the way it works, filtering so it works more like refining. And therefore you have a different, you can get your own process involved with it. But they've built it this way, and I'm assuming if they find stuff that should be changed, they'll change it for us. It has changed a fair bit, like I said, since October. You cannot, one of the things I discovered when I went to do the installation for this one is I can't install it over top of the old one. I had to take out the old one and put the new one in. So it doesn't pick up, they're not compatible as an upgrade, but they do work the same way.
So when you did that, did you have to rebuild any pages that use the old ones?
Yeah, I rebuilt the page.
Oh. And are you using a site collection and app catalog or the?
Yeah, I'm using a site collection app catalog, so I don't deploy globally.
Okay, that's interesting because that leads us to believe that we might not want to deploy this globally.
Yeah,
right?
the only exception to
if you've got an upgrade, then you'd have to rebuild every page in your entire tenant that used this.
Yes. If you want, the only exception to the rule, and even the old search box would work for the same thing as this, is if you want to target on a search box someplace on a content of page, like you want to search a target, you can use the search box as a targeting process to send you over a search results page, right? It wouldn't matter whether it was the new one or the old one to do that, because they work the same way.
That's just redirected us. That's all.
It does a redirect. Yeah, you set a redirect URL and it passes the K query over.
Okay. Oh, but that's a key point. Thank you for letting me know that. So if you install a new version, you might have to rebuild everything. So we don't want to install this globally in our tenant app catalog.
Yeah, because in my case, I always want to have Search Center scope to one location. I don't want it going everywhere. That was the reason why I did it in the app.
Okay. Yeah, I'm using this for specific site collection. So,
Yeah.
but I have it deployed globally, figuring, oh, I can use this everywhere. But I think I need to rethink that decision and deploy it locally.
Yeah, it's another issue. Is a governance issue too. That do I want people to be able to can have a site collection start playing with the search on their site?
Yeah, I hear you.
And because you can see, I think I spent about 10, 15 hours going through all the documentation, reading every line by line, figuring out the combinations you could do before I started doing anything that worked.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to understand it from the inside out. And that wasn't looking at source code. That was just looking at the way they documented it to work. Because there's so many dials on it, it can get very complicated very quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, if you really wanted to play with it in a simple fashion, then using it as a content query component would be probably the easiest way to use it, because the query is going to be your control, and you might want to play with the render at that point to create your own custom output.
Yeah, and I hadn't looked at that option. I hadn't even considered that. So thanks for pointing that out for me.
Yeah, that is probably one. I was hoping to do that. I installed all the lookbooks this week, as I wanted data on my site for another use. And where did I put that one? Here is it? No, many browsers. This one. Yeah. So I've gone and installed all the lookbooks. And to set up all these views in my lookbook, to be able to click on them as links, if I was able to use this is a content query web part, I could have done all this. Instead, I used the links, was it what do they call it? Quick links. And the quick links is a real pain. Right, so you've got your quick link settings, so how you want to show it, and then you've got each of the different items. So you got to set up the image, you got to go change. Where if I was able to query this right from the site, I could have pulled all the information for the same rendering right from that site and used it like a content query web part. And because I've gone and put in 5 of these for each of the lookbook groupings, I could have done 5 content queries and filtered by the actual site type. And I actually built a list with it all in too, so I could actually again combined it with a list. But this is painful, but now I have it, so I want to build another one that uses my own render. I was hoping to do that for today, but I got sidetracked with another major support issue today.
Looks great.
Does.
I don't know how many people are familiar with the lookbooks.
Yeah.
There's some, even though there's not a lot in here, there's a lot of really cool examples of stuff you can do in the rendering, like how you use what's out of the box to render stuff. I gotta admit, to use some of this stuff is not as simple as point and click.
But it looks sweet.
Yeah, it looks good, but to me, it's a good starting point when someone says, "What can I do?"
Right.
Right. It's never easy to tell somebody can do it. The other one is the hub site. There's a couple of them that are hub sites, so you can get examples of how hub sites link together. They're workable examples to people. The only problem I had is it did not install, and one of my sites had a bug around getting the planner to install to render. It doesn't render the planner, and I've got to go figure out why that was. But everything else seemed to come through. And then I went through and fixed some of my the temperature and clocks for some locations where they're using that. Because I want to point this for somebody else who doesn't have any idea what you can do in SharePoint now. This is a must. If you are really into SharePoint, have you used this, Peter?
I have. I was just actually recommending to Maha, who's on the call here as well, that there's a lot of great content in there.
Yeah. Have you done any of your own custom content yet?
Not into pathways. That's kind of my next conversation with Maha is, okay, how do we take the stuff that she's created and start to integrate it into Pathways itself.
Yeah, that's one of the next topics I have is I need to take from my customer, and we've integrated this in for them and integrate our various add-ins that we put in processes and get them documented into here. But you can do that. So anybody on the call who's not familiar, there's a learning pathways lookbook as a solution that you can actually go get all the learning material from Microsoft. It doesn't put the material in here, it's evergreened, but what ends up happening is training.
But basically you get all the Microsoft learning exposed in your own customer portal.
Yeah. And if they upgrade any of it or make changes to it, you're going to get it in your site. And you look at an example. These are all the different topics that you're looking at. This is a custom web part that they've built that goes and pulls it from their repository and renders it in your site. Not necessarily rendering this, but it actually updates your site in the background with information that it needs from them, which is the complicated. And then you can go custom profile it.
Are you guys using this in your tenants now or with your customers now?
Using it with a customer now, yeah. And
just starting to, yeah.
And yeah. It's going to come up in a second. Hopefully it comes up in a second. There we go. This is all the content that's defined in here. So you can go through here and turn stuff on and off. Customer, in my case, wasn't using Yammer, so we turned all the Yammer stuff off that was defined in here. Yet you can, so anywhere you just click on the hide this subtopic, and you can go create your own. You can go at the end and add your own stuff into this. So you can actually add your own groupings, put your own stuff in. And when you start doing that, you actually create your content pages in SharePoint. You don't actually use their process.
Yeah, we're about to roll this out, so I'm really interested in this stuff.
Yeah, I strongly recommend it. It's in its third version now, and I guess it's pretty matured to people to use.
So you guys host content in Microsoft Stream and use them as the source for your videos?
I don't know if Microsoft Stream is supported. YouTube is supported. Stream should be, because it's just a case of adding it to a page, right, Peter?
Yeah, it should be. I haven't tried it, but you would think so. Or so.
Yeah. There's a Stream web part now, so we should be able to add it.
Yeah, you would be able to add it if it's.
I would think.
Yeah, you go create a new custom page. You go point it at that new custom page, and you can put all the stuff in you need. You go build out the structure. So if it's multi-step, you build that all out, and then you actually point at all the pages that make each of those steps.
Cool.
But there's online help and all that stuff to do it. It's designed to be, it's fully documented on Microsoft's in Microsoft Docs. All these sites were built by Microsoft. They're not built by the community. Although this one does have community input.
Very nice. Well, I think we're almost at the half hour or 8:30 mark. I don't know if there's any last questions before we wrap it up from here.
Next month, are we having a session next month?
I assume we are, but I'm not sure what the topic is. I don't know if Lewis or Roy know that.
I'm not aware, Lewis.
I know I was talking to Dennis that wanted to do a talk, so I'll I don't think he's on the call, or is he on the call? Just looking.
I don't think so. No. So yeah, let's lock that down in the next week or so we can let people know. And just to reiterate, we will be posting the recording up. That should be up there, if not later tonight, then tomorrow. And I'll send an announcement out through the TSPUG mailing list just to let people know that that's there.
I'll send you I don't have a place to put the PowerPoints. I'll send you the PowerPoints, Peter, and you can put it up in the site.
Okay, I'll figure out where to stick it.
Yeah, I'll send it right after the call.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
So how does people think about Azure Sentinel with Office 365 as a session topic? That's something I'm thinking about. Anybody comment?
I'm going to claim ignorance. I'm not sure what Azure Sentinel is.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, it's just like security. Okay, in simple terms, security and incident monitoring, right? Let's say massive download in your Office 365, and that can create an incident and stuff. So, yeah.
Now, is it related to like Azure Threat Protection or Identity Secure Score, the Azure AD stuff?
Yeah,
Any of
yeah,
those?
it integrates with those types of things. Yeah, short answer.
Is that functionality available in the E5 tenant?
It's not a Office 365 or Microsoft, it's more of an Azure thing, but it integrates. You can connect it to Azure AD or information protection to like WAF or even third-party stuff, right? And also SharePoint as well. Like, you know, like the scenario is like massive download, right? You know, there's like a rule or something, a query rule that can detect that stuff and then create an incident, right? And then security operations can do that, or you spin up some kind of like logic app to automate that, right? Like create a ticket or do something, you know, like, you know, lock it down or whatever.
Well, I think security is top of mind for, you know, everybody working at home right now. That's even more so.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good topic. Why don't you and Lewis connect up and figure out, you know, does
Sure.
Dennis go up next or you, or what does that look like?
No, let Dennis go. I've been trying to, it's taking me a while to get my head around that kind of stuff. Like, because licensing wise, it's tricky to get stuff. Like trials and,
That licensing is very confusing. I do know that.
yeah, I'm just trying to get a handle of a trial. And that's the thing. But I've done some Azure Sentinel with other things, non-Office 365. It's cool. I already have a blog post series on it, but you know, I'd like to show that. Anyways, expect that in the next, not anytime soon, but next few months. So I just wanted to get a feel of what you know, you guys feel about it. So yeah, okay, I think it sounds like something to do. So keep you posted a couple months down the road.
Very good.
Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, thank you, Bill.
All right, great session, Bill. Thank you very much.
No problem, and you'll see an email from me shortly, Peter.
Awesome.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Okay, bye.